can remember last week, we said it's Luke chapter 9, we're in chapter 10 now, when Luke, in reporting about Jesus, as we've said, the Gospels aren't just historical biography, they're stories about Jesus' life to speak to the people they were writing to then to now. And so from chapter 9 on, including today and many more chapters, Luke is emphasizing the call to discipleship and what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, which we're all called to be. Now, does anybody remember what the two words last week that I said that began with C? I'll give you that hint that I mentioned as qualities of a disciple that we know we may not be there yet, but they're important. Anybody remember? Pardon? Courage? No, that's a good guess, though. Anybody know? This is what happens. See, why do I preach every week, right? Shucks. Hey, don't worry. Nobody remembers, huh? If I give you $10? Oh, some people. Okay. Yes. So anyway, I may ask you again next week, okay? So even for money. So, sometimes that motivates. The two words were, I got to remember, committed and consistent. I mentioned last week that, when I did a retreat, I asked people, okay, how many people here see that you're trying to be a disciple of Jesus? Most everybody raised their hand. And then I said, how many people here consider yourself a committed and consistent disciple of Jesus? And a couple hands went halfway up. But anyway, to make that point, we're talking about discipleship now. And trying to have a deeper understanding of it. And certainly in following the way of Jesus, and this is legitimate, we all want to experience from him and with him as the disciples did, especially those first 8 chapters of Luke brought this out, that being with Jesus and his being a presence in our lives is certainly meant to give us a deeper sense of hope and peace and healing and guidance and joy in our lives, especially our inner life, as we really center in this Jesus who conveys to us God's goodness deep within here. But also we hear in today's gospel, again moving another step, when Jesus says this, I am sending you like lambs among wolves. Now how would you like it if somebody today said, hey, I want you to follow me, and just got one thing to, or what if I said, I won't do it, probably I won't, at the end of Mass said, okay, go out, I am sending you like lambs among wolves. Now that may not sound too good. I don't even know if you want to leave the church. But the point being, lambs are gentle. Lambs are very vulnerable. They're pretty defenseless in terms of what they have. And wolves, they love mutton, and it's not good for the lamb. But there's Jesus. Now wait a second, Jesus. Is that the way to get followers? I mean, come on now. You tell them that? I think I'd scatter right then. Again, that call to be committed and consistent. But Jesus, he's not a politician, thanks be to God. And he is someone who says, hey, I want to name the reality. You will experience a purpose in your life and a peace and a strength. At the same time, if you're going to follow me in daily life, you're going to find that in many situations you may be dealing with difficulties or struggles. And I'm not going to try to paint a picture that it's all beautiful and nice and peace-filled. It's not. The world has a lot of struggle in it and evil in it, and even people who want to intentionally hurt people. To know that, Jesus puts that out there. Not so people run away, but so they know, hey, I guess I do need to be committed to the Lord. And I need in the midst of everything to have an interior life, an inner life of peace and hope and peace and strength, even if the outer life seems to be falling apart or people may be rejecting me as they rejected many of those first disciples. Who wants to feel that way? And I want to mention a circumstance that a lot of you know. I've mentioned this before, that I was co-founder of an organization called Heart to Heart Communications, and we did a lot of programs to help people connect their faith with their work life, whatever productive activity they do. And I know that was something that people have said that was a value, because maybe even for us here, and we define work as whatever productive activity you do. You can do that at home, you can do that as a volunteer, but how do we bring our faith to that? And that's something to be aware of. And here again, workplaces or work settings, sometimes we can be in situations that are very difficult, very troublesome, very wearisome, maybe not always as kind and loving as we want. How do we show faith there? Even if maybe we wouldn't use the language, but we feel like lambs among wolves. Quick example, there was a fellow who was actually talking at one of these retreats, again, about his own work situation. And he mentioned that a woman from a co-worker from his place came to talk to him. And she had a favor. And he asked her what the favor was. And she went on, first of all, to say, well, you know, the reason I'm asking you this favor is I know you're a Catholic Christian. And the fellow, as he was telling the story, he said, well, how did she know that? Well, for starters, he was very respectful, very honest, very caring, just a good guy. And in addition to being that, at time to time when people would talk, you know how co-workers do, he would sometimes talk about his faith, talk about something that happened at church, talk about some experience he had of God. Not in some heavy-handed way, just kind of sharing naturally. And she said she was always struck by that. And so when she had this favor, she was going to him. Of course, he said, what's the favor? And she said, well, our supervisor, it was his supervisor too, our supervisor, maybe you don't see this, but the support staff, which was mainly women, the support staff, he does not treat us very well. I guess he thinks we're less than everybody else. He's not very respectful, he's not very kind, he's not very appreciative. He's very difficult to be around, and sometimes he can put you down if you make the least little mistake. And so this fellow sharing said, well, what can I do about that? And she told him, as he passed on, can you talk to him? We need somebody to talk to him. Not the support staff, somebody more high up the ladder, you know, and you are. And maybe can you make some of these observations? And this fellow who was sharing with our group thought initially, oh, I don't know if I want to go there. You know, that makes waves, that's uncomfortable, that could be conflictual. Again, he wouldn't have used the language, but it's like, hey, I'm a lamb going to a wolf. You know, he's got greater power and position, so can't I just hold back? But as the woman shared with him and everything, because he is a man of faith, he thought about it. Initially, he said, no, I don't think it's going to make a difference anyway. But he could see the woman was really desperate. She wanted to stay working there, but she wanted it to be a better place. And so he listened to her, and probably that Holy Spirit moment in him, he said, okay, I will talk to him. And he did. He went to talk to him, not to hit him over the head with what the woman said. That wouldn't have done any good. But to share with him, basically, the observations. Because he saw it too. He wasn't just speaking for the woman. A lot of the other staff saw it. But you know, they were the higher-ups, so that didn't bother him. And it was like, wait a second, though. These other people are co-workers. They're support staff. They're human. What they do here matters as much as what anybody else does here. And so he went, and he basically, he got it from the supervisor. Basically, when he told him, and the supervisor said, well, yeah, oh, you talked to some women here. Women are overly sensitive, you know. And this fella thought, I think he's making an excuse here. And so he went back, and he shared some observations of some specific things he saw. He didn't bring up this woman. He didn't need to. Just things he saw. And the supervisor kind of like backed down a little bit, and not quite that day, but there was a conversation he said they had over a few days, that the supervisor began to get it, began to see that yes, he could be better relating with these folks. And maybe he just got too caught up in his position or title or his busyness or his worries. And so over time, because he was a decent guy, things began at least somewhat to turn around. But again, part of it was this woman went to this a supervisor there. You know, she didn't let fear keep, oh, if I say something, he's probably a crony with the boss, so I'm not going to bring it up. And then that guy, who could have backed down too, he said something. So again, a powerful everyday example, all of us, maybe, are there situations in our life where we're dealing with difficult people? And granted, sometimes with difficult people, you're in a position that you can't say something. On the other hand, if we're making an excuse for that, if there's somebody in our family or wider family, in our workplace, in our church, in certain situations where we're dealing with somebody and it's difficult, and maybe how they are and how they come across. Is it possible that we could say something? And maybe, and I know people have shared this, I don't know if it's going to make a difference or not. However, and sometimes, again, as I said, there's situations you can't maybe do. But there's other situations, maybe it won't make a difference. But as people have told me in a lot of different retreats and everything, they've said, but you know what? I still had to say something because that was my part. Whether this other person responds, gets it or not, at least I've shared authentically and lovingly and done my part. And really, that's what Jesus calls us to do. If we're going to be faithful disciples, that we need to recognize there's those difficult, maybe moments like we just talked about, where we're called to live our convictions, live with authenticity and goodness, and with love. Finally, I just say we have the example in that second reading where Paul talks to the Galatians and speaks about the cross. The cross of Christ that he took on. Because Paul, of all people, knew, one time he was killing Christians until the powerful witness of Stephen. But Paul knew that once he followed Jesus, and it's the same for all of us, at times following Jesus means taking up the cross. Not only dealing with suffering and sickness and hurt and loss, yes, but also maybe doing something that takes us out of our comfort zone, where at least we try to make some contribution to making the world around us and our own immediate circumstances a little better. Take a moment. That maybe we need to be responding to somebody in some circumstance as moving forward, committed and disciple of Jesus Christ. Take that moment. God bless you.